Hello, I'm Nathan Novak. I'm a motion media designer, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit about motion media, as well as showing the little differences between illustration and animation, and how it kind of compares up to that, and how it encompasses all of that into one single medium.
I'll start off with something that's a bit easier to understand. When working with animation, things that move, it's much different than working with illustration. In illustration, you're working on one key moment. You can spend all the time you want in that moment, and you can make it look as great as you want. When creating animation, you are working in multiple, so you can't spend as much time working on each frame to make it look great, because people aren't going to be able to see it, and it's going to take too long. And that's one of the great things about animation, is you don't have to be good at drawing necessarily to make good animation. All you have to understand are the main principles of it, and you'll be able to make any animation look amazing. And to give an object the illusion of life, Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, who were two animators of Disney in the early times, they made a whole book on creating it. And it explained how the importance of was to just make a small drawing, exhibit certain traits and qualities to give it that illusion of life. If you apply principles to what you make, no matter how simple it is, you'll give it the illusion of life. And I find that amazing. Something as simple as a flour sack or a sphere can be given the illusion of life. I'll be going over those principles with you. The first one is to have the correct timing on the object, or whatever it is, whatever form of medium you use. The timing is very important, because with incorrect timing, everything looks weird. When something is moving, we want it to be followed easily. The audience needs to understand why it's moving and where it's moving without losing sight of it. Having proper timing and rhythm allows the audience to easily follow the animations in which you create. The next principle is using easing. Easing allows things to look less robotic. It's whenever an object starts moving or stops moving. When it starts moving, you want it to ease into the motion. It starts slow and then it speeds up as it builds momentum. To ease out, it's like it already has that momentum, but it's going to ease out into a slow stop, because nothing moves at a constant speed and stops instantly unless it's mechanical. The next is giving it mass and weight. This actually ties in to the easing, because if something's heavier, when it's raised, it drops down, it hits hard. It looks like it hits hard. It doesn't bounce high. It hits the ground, bounces a little, and stops. If it's light, it raises, and when it hits the ground, it'll bounce really high in the sky. Then there's the anticipation. This is to let the audience know what's about to happen. It ties in with everything else as well. For instance, when someone's about to sneeze, they go, then they release the sneeze. Or when someone pulls an arrow, they lean forward to grab it, lean back. Another one is like the Wile E. Coyote, when he runs off the edge. He hovers there for a second, looks down, his body shoots, and then his head follows. Next are arcs. Anything that is natural has a pivot point. It's not straight, like mechanical. And it also plays into the easing. All of these principles correlate with each other and allow the other to happen. The next principle is also use of exaggeration, as I said before. Exaggeration allows things to have that animation to them, for lack of better words. That's what allows you to get a box to seem like, be happy, exhibit emotions, because if it perks up, you can tell that it's looking at something. You can feel that emotion. It has that illusion. And how it perks up is the squash and stretch, which also plays into the exaggeration as well as the anticipation. Squash and stretch is whenever something is going down, it squashes out. If it goes fast, it gets thin and skinny and shoots up. There's like whenever a punch is wound up, cranking it, and he throws it. And that's a blur. You don't have to animate everything in that blur. You just make it really quick, and when it hits, it's a pump. And the face stretches out to the form of the hand. And then it sits there for a second until he goes flying away, exaggerated. So, with all these concepts and principles in mind, they all complement with each other to create this illusion of life. This animated anticipation, exaggeration, the easing, all of that. And it stops things from looking robotic and things that are moving very awkwardly. So when working in motion media, or animation, or any form of that, it's good to understand just some main things about it. Keyframes are the frames which you're working on, and they're each individual frame which you draw, or create, or have a picture in. And then in between, there are the tweens, so the in-between frames, so the things that are happening in between. Now, depending if you're doing hand-drawn or using digital, they're either done for you or they're not done for you. And obviously, then there's the frame rate, how many there are a second. Usually, people work with about 12 or around 21. It's really rough to animate on anything above that. If it's like, say, 60 frames a second, that's a lot of drawing. But I don't know, it's possible, and it makes it look more fluid and less choppy. Some works that have inspired me to create motion media are very old works where it kind of helped me understand why some older art is held to such, I guess, value that it is. It's just the time that it was made in. A motion media designer that I enjoy so much was Len Lai. He had a theory on motion, but not the object itself, but the movement itself of the object that it took. And so, what I did was I just took objects and I caused their motion to move. I would drop something, and I would take the movement of that drop, and I would do a tracing of it as it fell to track its movement, and then I used just its movement and created animation with it. And I did the same with books flapping open. I did the same with something falling off of things. I really had a lot of fun creating something that was interesting and more experimental. And that's another thing that's great about motion media. Experimentation thrives with motion media. And a similar one, or not similar, but rather something Disney bought out to then use, was for Fantasia, where they bought Len Lai's concept and then used it to create Fantasia. That is something many people are similar with. And this concept of creating motion, of just motion itself, it's fascinating to me and I love it. That was me mostly explaining animation. So, with the concepts of animation understood, those can also be applied to motion media as well, because motion media is all-encompassing. Motion media can have anything from along the lines of cinematography, animation, sound design, VFX, 3D design. Everything can be encompassed into motion media, because motion media is just a multimedia form of creating motion or anything. You can make a collage of pictures. You can make a Lego frame-by-frame animation. Motion media is covering a huge area, and it's awesome. It gives you a large amount of freedom where you can't do with any other things, because it's essentially almost everything. At the same time, though, it's a bit intimidating, but that's what makes it fun.